Hello and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional. I'm your host, Sandy Lowries, and the Good Girl Confessional is proudly brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine. Today in the confessional, our very special guest is Sarah Rusbatch. After moving to Australia from the UK many years ago, Sarah has become Australia's very first accredited grey area drinking coach. She runs the SLR Wellness site and runs monthly challenges for women who want to take a break from alcohol or want to explore their relationship with alcohol further and maybe even give up for good. If, like many of us during the pandemic, you've questioned your relationship with alcohol and you're thinking about maybe having dry July, this might very well be the podcast for you. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah Rusbatch. Hello and welcome to the confessional. Sarah, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much for joining me here. And especially we're at two different time zones here. You're over in Perth and I'm here in Melbourne.
Absolutely. Yeah, but we made it work.
We did make it work. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So I first heard about you actually when a friend of mine was at a conference and you were a keynote speaker.
Okay.
And she was so impressed that she actually sent me a link and said, you know, you really should talk to this amazing woman. But I felt like it was really timely and I'm so thrilled that you could join us. Because, you know, you run this amazing group called the Women's Wellness Collective. And you are talking about really within that group, our relationships as women to alcohol. And I think during the pandemic, it would be fair to say that a lot of us started drinking a whole lot more than we were previously. And so I thought it was really timely. So tell us how that actually started. How did it come about?
So I guess I'll take you back to kind of my own journey around alcohol and my decision to stop drinking. So I had kind of, I guess, lived a normal drinking life like most others in their teens, 20s, 30s. I was living in London, that whole work hard, play hard mentality. I'd always been quite a big drinker. I'd always been someone that, you know, let's have drinks before we go out. Let's go out and get drunk. Let's carry on somewhere afterwards. I was always the life and soul of the party, shall we say. I moved to London after uni. My job interview was the fourth interview to join this company was in the pub to see how well you could handle your alcohol. So I was very well suited to that kind of job. So that was working in recruitment in London in the banking sector in the 90s. So it was lots of wining and dining. It was lots of client lunches. It was, you know, all of that. And I was a steady drinker, a big drinker. I wore my drinking capability like a badge of honor. I was proud. I could keep up with the boys. I didn't fall over after 2 glasses of wine. I could keep going. And so for me, that was kind of my identity, was Sarah the drinker. We then, after we had my son, decided to, my husband's from New Zealand, and he was like, I want to go and live somewhere with beaches and sunshine and the outdoor life and not stay in this crowded, messy, dirty city anymore. So we decided to move over this way, and that's how we ended up in Perth. And I think that was when my drinking kind of went from being about big social drinker. I never really used to drink that much on my own at home. I was never really someone that would you know, occasionally, but it certainly wasn't that I drank every day or anything like that. But when we got over here, I really struggled. I struggled with the fact that we had I had an 18-month-old and a newborn baby. I had no friends. I had no family. I had gone from having a really successful high-flying career to nothing. I was sat at home all day cleaning up baby sick and dealing with you know, young babies and young toddler. My husband was going out to work all day. And that was when wine became a friend, and definitely started. I was lonely, I was homesick, and I looked forward to my wine o'clock at 5 o'clock when I could, you know, happily open a bottle of wine. And so I definitely think, looking back, that was the point when my relationship with alcohol probably changed a little bit. But then carried on. We moved here just over almost 11 years ago now. So carried on with my drinking, was still drinking quite considerably. And probably when I hit my 40s was when I started noticing that alcohol was starting to take more than it was giving. I wasn't drinking every day, but when I did drink, I was noticing that I was always waking at 3 o'clock in the morning. Didn't matter whether I'd had 2 glasses or 2 bottles. I would wake at 3 a.m., unable to get back to sleep, and it really disrupted my sleep. And I'm someone that really needs my sleep. I'm not someone that can cope with those 5-hour nights. I'm a solid 8-hour girl. So for me, I was really grumpy. I was, from not having much sleep, feeling the effects of the alcohol from the night before, starting to feel quite lethargic, demotivated. I worked for myself and I had my own business. So I never had that whole thing of, I've got to be on my game at work, because I didn't have to be at work. I could quite happily drop the kids at school and then go and lie on my bed and play Candy Crush all day, which sometimes I did when the hangovers were bad. But I started to get this overwhelming feeling that it just wasn't how I wanted my life to be. I was noticing that I was getting quite anxious with my hangovers. My anxiety would be quite high. I would get really paranoid. I would sit there for ages thinking, oh, what did I say last night? Or did I say something that really upset her? Why hasn't my friend texted me this morning? She must really hate me. And all of this stuff that just wasn't me was starting to kind of go over in my mind quite a lot. I was feeling really low. But the problem was that I hadn't put it together with alcohol. So I was turning to alcohol to lift my low mood, thinking that that was the answer. So then I was in this vicious circle of drinking quite consistently and quite regularly, thinking it was the thing that took the edge off, made me feel better, when in actual fact, what I now know is it was causing so many of my issues. I went to the GP and I said to her, I'm really struggling. I can't seem to find my mojo. I'm not me anymore. And at no point did she ask me how much was I drinking, but happily wrote me a script for antidepressants, which I didn't take because I just knew in my heart that I wasn't depressed. I didn't feel like I was depressed. I felt like there was something else going on. But I just had this constant battle of I'd wake at 3 a.m., hungover, tired, dry mouth, beating heart, and going, right, I'm not drinking tonight. But then I'd have a day of work, dealing with, running a business, 2 young kids and the demands that they have, getting homework done, getting the ironing and the washing done, cooking dinner, bedtime. And before I knew it, it was 5 o'clock and the wine was staring me in the face, going, go on, just have one. It'll make you feel better. Go on, you deserve it. So then I would end up drinking again. And I was just in this vicious circle and I just couldn't get it to stop, Sandy. And so I remember one day lying on the sofa, really hungover, and reading that someone had read this book that had changed their relationship with alcohol. And I was like, what is this book you speak of? And what do you mean people can change their relationship with alcohol? And wow, is that something I need to do? So I read the book and it was This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. And I took, for the first time, probably in 30 years, I took an extended break from alcohol. And I did 100 days, and I can't even begin to tell you the difference in me. I felt like I was getting to know myself without alcohol. I felt I had energy, I had joy, I had happiness. My skin was clear, my eyes were sparkling, I lost weight, my spots cleared up. Like all of this stuff was just like, wow, this is amazing. And it was my first glimpse of who Sarah was, who wasn't the big drinker Sarah, who Sarah was as another Sarah that I hadn't even really got to know before. So, but I quite liked her. And that was what I knew. That was my overwhelming feeling was, wow, there's another side to me that isn't a slave to wine and revolving her life around wine and feeling like crap all the time and beating herself up for drinking when she said she wouldn't. If I can step out of that cycle, wow, there is a lot of potential here for how I could change my life. So I did 100 days, felt amazing, but at no point did I think this is forever. Like it didn't even occur to me. It was just like, I must just reset. I've reset now. I clearly don't have a problem anymore. Moving forward, I'll be able to moderate and I'll just be one of those people that just has 1 or 2 once a month with a roast dinner and that'll be it. Doesn't quite work like that. So when I did go back to drinking, I was straight back to the levels that I'd been at before, which is really, really common for anyone who has had quite a heavy relationship with alcohol. No matter how long you take off, when you go back to drinking, you get straight back on that drinking train wherever you got off. It's not like you start back at the beginning. So what followed was 2 years of trying to moderate, not being able to, taking extended breaks from alcohol, not being able to really give in to the idea that it was going to be forever, always finding a reason after 3 months, 4 months or whatever to go back to drinking. But the problem was that I'd had a glimpse of this Sarah without alcohol, and I just knew that I really liked her and I wanted to give her a chance. And so in April 2019, I made the decision I was going to do a year, because I'd never done that long before. And I thought, a year, what's 1 year out of my life? If I lived to be 80 and I started drinking at 15, which was very common in Northern England in the 90s, then that is 65 years of never knowing me without alcohol. What's 1 year just to explore who that version of me is and then decide if I want to be that person? So I did my year and I've never looked back. And so that was kind of my story. But with that came so much passion to want to be able to support and empower other women to do the same. But I knew how bloody hard it is in a world that is so alcohol centric, and it's forced on us at every occasion, from first birthday parties to funerals to weddings to, you know, parents' evenings to mums groups to running a half marathon and getting past a glass of wine when you cross the finish line. You know, all of these events, wine is there to be seen as a celebration. And it's really, really hard when you decide you want to stop and you feel like you're the only one. So that's why I set up this group, the Women's Wellbeing Collective, was to share what I was learning and hopefully support other women. So I only set it up in October last year. So it's been 9 months and we've got almost 4,000 members already. So it's amazing. Like, it's just been incredible to see the women coming into the group, and women are sharing that with their friends who are sharing it with their friends, and they're all coming in going, hey, you want to come and see this English girl that talks about her drinking? And I think the difference is just that I talk about it in a way that no one else really has or does. And I think that I've obviously hit a chord. I got interviewed by one of the major Australian online magazines, and they shared my story, and in one weekend 1,700 women joined my group.
Wow.
Show, right?
Wow, that's huge. And you know, I have joined your group, I will say, and jumped in and you know, partially I started doing it for research because I was so excited to sort of have you coming on the podcast. But it sort of, for me, was a real eye-opener, because I think I'm definitely one of those women, and Australia, just like Britain, has very much a drinking culture. As you know, we start quite young, and every occasion, as you say, definitely alcohol is one of the guests at the party, always. And, you know, I think, as I said earlier, I'm one of those women that during the first lockdown here in Australia, especially in Melbourne, we had extreme lockdowns, and we're just now coming out of lockdown 4.0, where alcohol sort of just became a thing, and we couldn't go out to bars, and we couldn't, you know, go out for dinner, and we couldn't really go anywhere. So, you know, I started making cocktails at home, and we were doing Zoom chats with girlfriends and all having a drink. And, you know, I just found that I personally was drinking a lot more during COVID, but you know, during the lockdowns caused by COVID. But beyond that, it's really interesting that then the drinking continues. And so for me to join your group was really eye-opening. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that it's a really sly and subtle increase that we don't really often realize. But before we know it, we're drinking 5 nights out of 7. And it's become the coping mechanism. We've built that neural pathway that goes, when I'm stressed, when I'm worked up, when I'm angry, when I'm pissed off with my husband, when I'm frustrated with my kids, whenever any of those negative emotions come along that are not nice emotions to sit with, we've taught ourselves must have wine. So then what starts to happen is the neural pathway has been created and it gets pretty set in. And then as soon as we get those feelings, we've taught ourselves that is because it's an instant quick fix. There was nothing else like a glass of wine to give you that instant gratification of just going, boom, right. Suddenly I don't feel angry. Suddenly I don't feel stressed. Suddenly I don't feel, but the problem is it might work for that one glass, but then, as is often the case with everybody, when we take it to a level that it becomes unhealthy, it starts to have a way knock-on effect. And that's what happened to me and to many of the women that I work with.
And it's really fascinating, I think, too, I've had this discussion with a lot of girlfriends, I'll be honest, about how do you know when drinking is problematic? And then how do you know when it goes beyond problematic and someone really has a major issue with alcohol?
So in the world that I live in, we call it grey area drinking. So if you think about someone's drinking as being on a scale of 1 to 10, and 1 would be someone, I've got a couple of friends like this, they just don't think about drinking. It just doesn't feature in their lives. Like maybe at a wedding, if there was a glass of champagne for the toast, they would have a sip and do a cheers. But other than that, they just don't think about it, don't care about it. Number 10 on the scale would be someone who needs to have physical medical intervention to come off alcohol, who is physically dependent and would actually die if they suddenly stopped drinking without medical intervention. So what's in the middle? That is what grey area drinking is. And the thing that I'm so passionate about is that there's no support available for people in that middle area. So people who don't identify as alcoholics, but do have a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol. Those are the women that I'm working with, because you don't have to hit rock bottom to decide to stop drinking. But the way that society is structured is they say you do. They say you have to go and stand up in a church hall and say, hi, I'm Sarah, I'm an alcoholic, in order to get support. So if I don't identify as an alcoholic, where do I go? Because it's still become an unhealthy crutch, but it's still something that I find really hard to break. And I'm finding myself doing it even when I'm not. And it's really interesting because the question that I get asked most is, how much were you drinking? Because everyone wants to know, what was the number? Because if your number is bigger than my number, then I'm okay, I don't need to stop. And my answer to that is enough to feel like it was taking more than it was giving. And to me, that is what it is. I'd crossed a line. I used to love getting drunk and didn't really suffer that much from hangovers and didn't have any massive adverse reaction to it. As soon as I hit my 40s, and I think that is a women's hormonal thing, as well as it being 20 plus years of consistent drinking, I'd got to a point where A, I needed more to get that buzz, and B, the physiological effects within the body are different because we've been drinking for such a long time. So because of all of those things, it just felt like after I hit 40, like I never used to get the sleep thing. I never used to get that 3 a.m. wake up. But then it just became all the time. The anxiety, I had a couple of days when I lived on the same road as my kids' school. We're about 5 houses from the school. I had to drive them because I couldn't bear the thought. I was so anxious and paranoid that I couldn't bear the thought of bumping into one of my friends or one of the school mums and having a conversation with them, because I was so caught up in the anxiety from the hangover that I would drive them and let them out the car with like my hat on and my sunnies, so I didn't have to have a conversation. Now that's not me. We've only known each other for what, half an hour, and you can see I'm a chatty person. I'm open, I'm warm, I'm friendly. I love meeting women, and I was like a shell of myself. And so that's, I think, is the question that I get everybody to ask themselves: is alcohol starting to take more than it's giving?
And it's really, yeah, and it's fascinating too. Like, we live in such a society that is all about alcohol, that even, I've had friends say, they're I really need to lose weight. I'm sort of on a health kick. So I've given up wine, but I'm drinking vodka or gin instead. Okay. And so this is the thing. And one of the things I wanted to discuss with you, because although your relationship was with wine, and I've got to tell you, I'm a wine girl, but I also love a gin or two. It's not really just about wine, is it? It's alcohol in general.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I definitely had more of a thing for wine, but I have been there. I have been that woman on Weight Watchers going, I'm going to have a gin and diet tonic because there's no calories in that, so I can still get smashed, but I don't have to worry about the sugar content.
Yeah, and that's common. I hear this all the time as a common theme. But what I'm starting to see too is this kind of shift, even in mainstream, social media especially, is starting to see companies that are popping up all over the place. One of them I think is called Sam's. There's a whole lot of them who are bringing out non-alcoholic options. Whether it's, a non-alcoholic wine or a non-alcoholic gin or whatever. And my daughter recently, who doesn't drink alcohol, so she just doesn't like the taste of it, and she's chosen not to, and she's in her 20s. Completely not like her mother, obviously. And she just got like a non-alcoholic whiskey, if you like, because she liked the idea, like she likes the taste and she likes of whiskey, or she liked the idea of having like a little nip when other people were, but she just doesn't want to drink.
Yeah, so I've actually launched Perth's first alcohol-free drink store because we didn't have any based here in Perth. And I had ordered from some of the East Coast companies, but the delivery time had taken a really long time. So the other thing I've been busy doing over the last couple of months is launching a business that sells that in Perth. And I think that they're a brilliant alternative because the amount of time that you have to justify not drinking. But the thing that upsets me the most, Sandy, is that in the UK now, every restaurant and bar that you go to will have a whole page of alcohol-free drinks. Like, it's fully acceptable to have alcohol-free 3 or 4 wines, 3 or 4 beers, a few sparklings and a few gins on every menu. Like, it'd be very unusual not to see that. I don't know about you, but over here in Perth, you do not see that anywhere.
I will honestly say here in Melbourne, which, as we know, is a bit of a, the restaurant capital, I guess, or whatever of Australia. No, I don't see that on menus, and I certainly don't see it as being, offered up as an option either by waiters.
It's starting to happen more, but it's going to take time. I went to a cocktail party and I had on a beautiful, ball dress at this at the Crown. It was all amazing, but of course I don't drink, and so everyone else is stood there with their champagne. And I said, "Oh, can I have a sparkling water?" Because the other alternative was Coke or lemonade. Now I don't know about you, but I don't want to stand with a can of Coke in a ball gown, and I don't want the sugar. So I said, "Can I have a sparkling water?" No, we don't have any. Okay, can I just have a still water? Do you know what he did? He handed me a warm bottle of plastic, a plastic bottle that was warm, hadn't even been in the fridge, of water. I said, "Can I have a glass, please?" Like, the way I was made to feel because I wasn't drinking champagne, like, things have got to change, right?
I absolutely agree. And so I think that this is phenomenal that you've started a store basically where people can just get those alternatives, which is fantastic. And is it a physical store or an online store?
It's online at the moment, but we're hoping it will go physical. But it's interesting what you said about your daughter, because I find, Sandy, that the majority of the women I'm working with are our generation. The lower generation, the younger generation, are not turning to drink in the way that we all did as youngsters and have carried on to do in our 40s. And I would say 90% of the women I work with are 40s and 50s. And they've used alcohol as some kind of coping mechanism for a really long time, and it works for a really long time until it stops working. And when it stops working is when you start going, right, well, what else have I got in my toolkit? And that's when you realize you've got nothing, because all you've used for 20 years is booze to numb the feelings, to distract from stress and overwhelm and anger and frustration and sadness. And that's where I come in. But there's only one of me, and there needs to be so many more, because I've got a wait list. Like, I can't keep up with the demand, because women want to talk about this stuff. I've got one client who was turned away from one of Perth's top private drug and alcohol clinics because she wasn't drinking enough.
Wow. Yeah, and you're right. There's a total gray area. I would say that there's a lot of women out there who fall into that category, myself included, who I guarantee we all at one point or another have looked ourselves in the mirror that next day feeling a bit foggy or whatever. Damn, I swear I'm going to stop now, and I won't do it. I recently, went on this health kick, and I was doing keto, and of course I went alcohol free for 5.5 weeks, and I felt great, and I looked less puffy and all those things. I don't know that I was sleeping better, but probably because that's not a long enough period of time. Having said that, I've also, and this is true of a lot of women in their 50s, I've hit perimenopause. And so on top of that, you kind of get this hormonal thing, which definitely the alcohol, I've noticed, really impacts. So
massively.
Right. So when I drink, it's, definitely more hot flushes, more all of that stuff, it's heightened. And I do know women who've actually given up alcohol because of perimenopause and menopause, which is kind of interesting. Whereas I'm kind of like, oh, it's not that bad, I'll soldier on. But I gave up drinking for 5.5 weeks. I did feel better. There's no two ways about it. But as you say, then there's this kind of thing where you go, well, I can control it. I'm fine. And so, when I went to something with an occasion, and of course, we were out of lockdown for exciting, and of course, just started drinking again.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's such a familiar story. I'm actually working with a hormonal menopause doctor at the moment who is helping, not for me personally, but to put together a program for the women in my group, because everyone is of that similar age and they are really interested, because there's actually really scientific reasons as to why our liver really struggles to break down alcohol when we're having these hormonal changes during the perimenopause and menopause years. And it's scientific reasons as to why we really should be cutting back on the alcohol if we want to sail through those years and not have all of the disruptive side effects that we as women have to put up with in those menopause years. And it's actually really, really linked to anxiety as well. And I hadn't realized that. So I had wondered, well, why am I feeling so anxious and so low and so paranoid? And that's a common side effect of perimenopause. And if you combine that with a hangover, it's the double whammy.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I do have a lot of friends actually who had found that their anxiety levels had definitely gone up during, once they hit perimenopause or menopause. And you're right, it is quite common. So I think the really interesting thing, and you said it before about your journey, is that a lot of us don't actually even kind of link anxiety or feeling flat or whatever with alcohol. And especially those that don't particularly drink, say, high levels of alcohol, but they're drinking 1 or 2 glasses, most nights. They don't link it with depression or anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading or listening to something the other day, and they were saying, if you think about most people of, in 30s and 40s or whatever, in both the UK and Australia, probably drink Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Right? That would be quite standard. It takes 48 hours at least for alcohol to leave the system. So then you're not feeling, your body's still processing the alcohol all day Monday, all day Tuesday. Wednesday, you might be feeling back on your game. You might then go, Wednesday night, hump day, I'll go and have a glass of wine. And no matter, even if you just have 1 or 2, it's going to disrupt your sleep, which is going to disrupt your energy, your motivation, your mood, your nutritional choices, all of that kind of stuff. On Thursday, that's 1 day a week where you're on your A game. 1 day when you are feeling the best that you could feel, where your energy levels, your motivation and your productivity are as high as they can be. 1 day a week.
Yeah, wow, it's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I wonder too, I mean, I was thinking about this quite a lot. I wonder how intergenerational it is as well, because Britain, Ireland, all of Great Britain, Australia, we, it's like a full-on drinking culture that's been going on for many, many generations. This is not like an overnight thing. And although I've often referred to us as the cocktail generation, because a lot of women that I know, they sort of started on cocktails, and it sort of got, everyone drinks wine, of course, but a lot, especially in Melbourne, a lot of cocktail bars and a lot of, rooftop bars with that kind of vibe culture, that it just became so acceptable that even after work, you just head to a bar and have a few cocktails. And not really recognizing the level of alcohol that sits in, say, a cocktail. People kind of, I guess we all try and fool ourselves occasionally and sort of say, well, as I mentioned, I'll have a gin and diet tonic and I'm doing much better than if I drank that bottle of wine. And I guess that's the thing as well. So my mum was definitely a wine drinker. So I do look at that intergenerational thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Whether or not your parents were like alcoholics or not, most of us grew up in a house where it was modeled to us that you needed alcohol to have a good time, that you had alcohol at every celebration. I can clearly remember my mum and dad having an argument and my dad going straight to the liquor cabinet and pouring himself a whiskey. So even as a young girl, that subliminal messaging was, when you're angry, when you're stressed, when you're annoyed, go and have alcohol, and it's interesting what we do pick up. So that was, I remember the very first time when I would have been about 18 or 19, I was still living at home and I think I'd had an argument with an ex-boyfriend or something, and I'd got home and I remember going to my dad's drinking cabinet and pouring myself a whiskey because that's what I'd seen him do in that situation. I didn't even like the taste of it, but that's what I thought, well, that was the only coping mechanism available to me that might make me feel better. And so I think that, yes, it's what was modeled to us, but then I also think if you think about people of women of our age, what was modeled to us in our early 20s and stuff, it was Sex in the City. It was, come on, women can have it all. We've got the career, we're making our own money, we can go and have cocktails with the girls and all of that. And God, it was great. I absolutely loved it. I'm not saying that there was anything bad about that, but that I think is why we do have so many women now that have never, ever created any other coping mechanism for dealing with stress and discomfort.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I like that, you were talking before about how you work one-on-one with women, which is extraordinary, to help them on their journey and to help them recognize and I guess understand more their relationship with alcohol. But you also run this group, which people can join. And one thing that struck me about it was there's no guilting people or shaming people.
No,
it's very, very warm and welcoming. And I really wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you. And that was deliberate for me to create a group that had that kind of feel to it. And I've been so blessed I've not had a single troll in that group. For a group of nearly 4,000 women to have never had to remove a comment or never had to say to someone, hey, you've crossed the line there. Never, ever had to do it. It is so non-judgmental and open and welcoming. So yes, I do. So the group's free and there's loads of resources and people share and support each other. But what I do is I run an alcohol-free challenge once a quarter. And I do it in a separate group because I think it's nice to create that intimacy when you're going through something with a group of other women. So I will create a small group for the women that sign up to do that. And then they get so much support throughout the month. So obviously I've got one coming up for July. But I do a daily post and interview or live Q&A session or something every day for the whole month where we talk about different things. We talk about like stuff that no one else is talking about, sober sex. Loads of us have never had sex sober before, like dealing with navigating our friendships when all of our girlfriends are going out and getting pissed and we don't want to go and we can feel really left out, but we don't know how to deal with that because it's a new situation to us. Or how do you cope if your partner's still drinking and you're not? And how do you cope with sugar cravings? Because it's really common to get really high sugar cravings in the first month or so when you're going through the detox period. So I cover absolutely everything. I share loads of podcast interviews. I share the books that helped me the most during sobriety. And then I do live interviews with guest experts on nutrition, on hormones, on menopause, and everything like that. So it's a really, really amazing low-cost way to get access to all of my knowledge and all of my resources whilst doing it alongside a group of other women. And the women in the group become such close friends. Like, even though they don't meet each other in person, they're all supporting each other. They're all sharing with each other. Someone will come home and be like, oh, I've had a crap day today. I really want a wine. And within a minute, everyone will be jumping on, going, go and have a bath, go for a walk, phone a friend, and putting in all of this. And so just to feel that you've got that level of support during something that is a really difficult thing to do makes all the difference.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's why I really wanted to bring that up, because if someone's listening to this podcast thinking, oh, yeah, if I'm honest with myself, I'm one of the women in that gray area and maybe I am drinking too much and I'm not really sure where to start. I really wanted people to feel that they could join your group and not feel that they're going to get shamed or anyone's going to attack them about how many glasses of wine they drink or whatever. No. And so it is a lovely place. And so that's why I'm really glad that I jumped in there and I joined. As I said, already I can see the benefits of being in a group like that. And as you say, it's unfortunate that there's not more resources and there's not more people out there doing this, but we're really grateful that you're out there and doing this. So that's really good.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, so if someone's listening and they're going to jump into a group, hopefully, what are some of the tactics or what are some of the helpful things to do if you're trying to cut out alcohol?
I think the first thing is to get really clear on your why, because you have to come to the table with a really clear reason as to why you're doing this. Because if you don't take that time to really reflect on that, then you're probably going to fail at the first 5 o'clock craving, because we've got to have our why. We've got to know why we're doing it. Like for me, I wasn't being the mum that I wanted to be. I wasn't being present with my kids. I was sick of feeling bad about myself all the time, because not only was I feeling physically bad, the negative self-talk was so high, because I was going, oh, there you go again, you said you'd only have one glass and you had a bottle again, and all of that stuff where we as women are so hard on ourselves. And I was so sick of that constant having a go at myself, and the constant feeling bad about myself. And I was reflecting on kind of, it was making me put on weight. My hormones were completely out of balance. So I got really clear on what were the reasons I was doing this. And I encourage everyone to write those down. And then I encourage everyone to find a group, because doing it on your own is too hard. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Do it with a group of other women who are all on that same path as you, because if your friends are still drinking, it can feel really lonely, and you can go through really big emotions, because what happens in that first month or two is we've been used to numbing our emotions, particularly the yucky ones and the ones that we don't want to feel. So we can find that we've got to feel our emotions. And that's great when you're feeling all of the positive and happy emotions, but it's hard when you're feeling emotions that come to the surface of, you know, frustration and sadness and anger and all of that kind of stuff. So doing that with another group of women makes such a big difference. Read the books. There are so many brilliant books out there, shared by women who share their journey to giving up alcohol, as well as some really factual books about, let's just get clear on what alcohol's doing to our body. And for some people that works really well, because they want to know the facts so that they can really go, okay, this is really good. This is, you know, going to help me to make that change. Podcasts, there are some brilliant alcohol-free podcasts out there that you can listen to. I think just immersing yourself into this world, it's so funny because I didn't even know it existed, and once you step into it, it's just like going, oh my goodness, there is this whole sober world out there with thousands of women supporting each other, cheering for each other. I say to everyone, set up a little Instagram account for yourself that isn't your real name, that is you documenting your journey about sobriety, and follow some really prolific posters that do a lot within the sober world. And there are so many, because staying inspired, hearing other people's stories, all of that kind of stuff is so important in the early days. And getting yourself a list of what are the things that I can do for self-care that will just really look after me in this first month. You know, like Claire Pooley, who wrote the book The Sober Diaries, she shares the story that when she gave up alcohol, she had a bouquet of flowers delivered to herself every Friday. So instead of having a Friday night wine, she would take delivery of her flowers. She would always be able to see them. She didn't care about the money because she wasn't spending it on wine, but it was that visual gift to herself that reminded her of what she was doing for herself. So I'm all about sober treats. Go book in the massages, buy the lipstick, buy the dress, you know, do all of the stuff that makes you feel good about yourself and makes you truly acknowledge that you're doing something that's really bloody hard in an alcohol-centric society, but which is going to be of so much benefit to you.
Yeah. And the other thing that, you know, you hit on a little bit there was how expensive alcohol is. And we have no problem spending that money on wine or gin or whatever it is that people drink, beer, I don't know, whatever people drink. But, you know, people, a lot of times women will say, oh, I can't do that for myself. That's too much money, or I can't, right? And so, sorry. But yeah, it's really fascinating that if it's a bit like, you know, smokers, you give up smoking, you've got all this, suddenly you've got all this cash to do things for yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, yeah. So I think that those are some really fantastic points, and I will encourage everyone to jump into this group. Even if they're just interested or wondering or questioning, you know, am I drinking too much? It's a really fantastic group to get involved with. I will definitely put the links up though in the show notes so everybody can jump in. As you also said, you do work with clients one-on-one, and there is a waiting list for that.
Yeah, so what we do in the one-on-one is something that's really interesting. So I trained with Jolene Park in the States, who is one of the only people globally that offers training for coaches to specialize in grey area drinking. So I'm one of Australia's first accredited grey area drinking coaches, which is where you're not providing alcohol addiction counselling, you are providing the resources to soothe the nervous system outside of needing alcohol. So the first thing I do with clients is a neurotransmitter questionnaire. And the reason I do that is because we have a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is the neurotransmitter that our brain releases that calms us down, that basically is the anti-anxiety hormone. But alcohol completely disrupts our body's ability to create GABA. So 90% of the women I work with are deficient in GABA. So I do the questionnaire to work out if that's the case, which often it is. And then I've got some brilliant resources that I provide them how to increase our GABA through food, through supplementation, and through lifestyle. That's the beginning of the work that we do together, is to start to make those changes. And then we work together. If people are drinking because of anxiety, I've got a lot of resources that I provide to help them to soothe their nervous system. If people are drinking because of peer pressure, we talk through all of that. We brainstorm ideas for how they can still get connection with their friends without having to go out to a pub and be around people drinking all the time. So it's just a really tailored, unique system that works for you. And that's what we do together when we work one-on-one.
That's fantastic. And generally when people work with you one-on-one, how long does that go on for?
So it's a 30-day program, which is quite intense, and we meet once a week, and then it's up to them. So then quite often we might drop to once a month, or some will say, that's it, I'm okay for now, I'll come back to you if I need to. It just depends. Some people want to carry on and do another weekly for another 4 weeks. It just depends. And the other thing that I do that I will mention is on the back of my alcohol-free challenges, which I do once a quarter, I open the doors to my group coaching program, which is called Rediscovering Me. And the reason I do that is because I find when women remove alcohol, they go, and I talk from personal experience when I say this, we go on a journey of self-discovery, because it's like what I was saying to you before, who am I without alcohol? Because lots of us don't know that. And it's an 8-week group coaching program where the women get to know each other really well. We meet once a week on Zoom, and we talk about everything from identifying our values, working out if we're living our life aligned to our values, working out the influence of the people in our lives and how they impact us, working out our strengths, our tendencies, our limiting beliefs, and starting to address them, self-care and self-compassion, how do we talk to ourselves? And we finish with building an operating system. And the operating system is, I truly believe if we are doing all the things that we can within our power, we can manage our mind a hell of a lot better. So what goes into the operating system is the stuff that we know helps us feel our best. So for me, it's things like being alcohol free, getting 8 hours sleep a night, eating well, drinking enough water, having connection with a good friend, meditating, journaling, exercising, having time in nature. And it's not to say we've got to do every single one of those things every day, but it's getting clear on if we're doing most of these things most of the time, my mind is a nice place to be. If things start to drop, if I have a splurge and have shitloads of sugar and it really like spikes my insulin, then I drop. I don't go to the gym because I'm feeling tired. I haven't seen a friend and I'm lying on the sofa doing nothing. And if those things happen, the negative self-talk will start. And so it's how do we manage our mind? And we manage our mind with what we're doing and what we're putting into our body and how we're spending our time and who we're spending our time with. So that's what we kind of work towards at the end of that group coaching program, so that everyone leaves with their own operating system.
Wow. Yeah. And it's, you know, watching the sort of support and the messages and things that I was, you know, watching in the group, it's quite powerful, you know, that,
yeah.
And, you know, everything that we do at the Good Girl Confessional Women Beyond 40 magazine is exactly that. It's women supporting other women, regardless of the journey that they're on, and helping other women to rise. And you're an incredible, example of one woman changing so many lives. And, you know, because you have, and as I said, while I'm surprised that there's not more people out there doing this, I'm really grateful that I got to chat with you and meet you here today, Sarah.
Thank you for having me on. You know, I'm so passionate, as you can tell in my voice when I talk about this, because I wish I'd had the support back then that I'm now able to give to people. And I just know how much it's needed, and I know what a difference it makes.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I know that you are touching the lives of so many people. As you say, 4,000 and growing in this group of amazing women. I will put all the links up to this show after this show, so that everybody can find out where to go, what resources, and once they jump into your group, they'll find a whole lot of resources there that will help, and they'll get to know more about what is grey area drinking.
Yeah, and absolutely. And have a look on my website as well. There's a whole page on grey area drinking on my website. And I offer 20-minute free discovery calls. So people can just book in, have a chat with me, find out if working with me is suitable for them. And then they can decide if they want to. So, but we've definitely still got some spaces left for the July challenge. So if any of your listeners want to sign up for it, it's life-changing. Like, I literally did one in January and one in April. And these women are messaging me and going, I've tried everything in the past, and yet stumbling across this group and the support and the resources, it's what's made all the difference.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. Yes. And so if anybody is listening and they want to jump on board, please sign up for the July challenge. And afterwards, we'd love to leave notes on the podcast. Let us know how it went.
Absolutely.
I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. It has been an absolute delight to meet you, and what you're doing is incredible. When as I said, you are changing so many lives, and let us hope that people will be so inspired by you that more people will start doing this sort of work, because there's a lot of work in this area needed.
Absolutely. And like I said at the beginning, my message is not alcohol is bad. My message is, if it's starting to take more than it's giving, maybe it's time to question your relationship with it.
Fantastic. It's a brilliant message as well. So please shout out your website now, just before we go.
Oh, yeah. So it's just SLR Wellness. So SLR stands for my name, Sarah Louise Rusbatch, slrwellness.com. And then my Instagram and Facebook page is at SLR Wellness. And then the group is the Women's Wellbeing Collective. If you go on my website, you'll see the link to sign up to the challenge. And just in case anybody listening is here in Perth, I have a meetup group in Perth for women who want to meet and socialise without alcohol. So we meet once a month, and we do loads of fun activities like stand-up paddleboarding, hiking. We did yoga last weekend. So we just do loads of things. You don't have to be completely sober to join the group. All it is we don't drink at these events. So it's just a safe place for women to meet and socialise once a month without alcohol.
That's fantastic. That's brilliant. As I said, all the links will be in the show notes for this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine, available now at wb40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.